Good afternoon. It's Tuesday, the 12th of May. I'm Erin Viner, and this is IBA News, broadcasting from Jerusalem. We open in Nepal, which has been hit by yet another massive earthquake around 11 a.m. local time, with the epicenter near Mount Everest. Today's 7.3 magnitude tremors come less than 3 weeks after the South Asian nation was rocked by a devastating quake that killed over 8,000 people. So far, at least 42 deaths have been reported today, and that number is certain to rise. News of the latest disaster broke just as the IDF medical team landed at Ben Gurion Airport, returning home after dismantling Israel's field hospital in Kathmandu. And Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has informed the soldiers that they may have to go back to Nepal. We get more in this report from IBA's Aryeh O'Sullivan.
Tragedy has followed tragedy in the Himalayas. A strong earthquake has again hit Nepal this morning, injuring hundreds and killing over a dozen people in its wake. The 7.3 earthquake struck a country that was still digging out from the devastating earthquake that hit it on April 25th, and that killed over 8,000 people, including an Israeli trekker. It was so strong it was felt as far away as New Delhi in India. It sent panicked people scurrying out of structures, some already weakened by the previous quake, or living in tents. Others gathered at open school grounds. Officials say the casualties came after several buildings collapsed in a district north of the capital of Kathmandu.
I think it's a really big hit of earthquake because the gate has also slanted and every pole are moving like that they will fall again. That is the thing right now.
Just now the big quake came and we all ran out of the building to keep ourselves safe. We are just trying to contact with our family members whether they are okay or not.
I'm trying to call to my home, but network is busy. It's not reachable. I'm worried for my family.
You know, we all are families, so Nepal it's a great loss. More than 8,000 are gone, so that's a very big tragedy to Nepal. So, and I hope and I wish that just the earthquake it has occurred now. I wish that it has not made any loss of Nepalese again.
The epicenter of the latest quake was about 75 kilometers east of Kathmandu, and it was closer to Mount Everest, where the previous earthquake set off deadly avalanches. The quake today was followed by strong aftershocks, with the strongest measuring 6.3 on the Richter scale. As fate would have it, the Israeli medical aid team, which had been helping since the first quake, had just left Kathmandu and arrived in Ben Gurion Airport, where news of the fresh disaster emerged. The rescue crews, doctors and nurses and medics had been working in Nepal almost immediately after the first quake hit. They had been administering first aid and performing operations and delivering babies. They left behind the field hospital as a gift to the impoverished country. It's not clear what Israel will do now. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is reportedly receiving updates from Nepal, and it could be that Israel will dispatch another delegation to help the stricken country. Aryeh O'Sullivan for IBA News.
In other news, and after a hiatus of 5 months, the nation's legislators returned to work yesterday evening, and the first vote of the 20th Knesset was to expand the number of cabinet ministers. Here with the details is IBA's political correspondent, Ellie Wogelenter.
The first order of business of the new Knesset was to undo the effects of a bill passed by the previous government, as Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's bid to expand the government passed its first Knesset reading last night. Following 5 hours of heated opposition rhetoric, the Knesset voted in favor of an amendment to the Basic Law of Government. It will enable the new government to have 20 ministers instead of 18, allow for 4 more deputy ministers, and reinstate the position of ministers without portfolio. Delaying implementation of the 18-minister limit now enables the Prime Minister to hand out additional portfolios to satisfy the demands of his own party members, who have yet to be assigned cabinet positions. All 61 members of the new coalition government voted in favor of the legislation, and all 59 members of the opposition were present and voted against it. After the bill passed its first reading, Knesset Speaker Yuli Edelstein officially announced that Netanyahu would be able to form a government, thus giving the Prime Minister a week to have the government sworn in. Likud sources say the Prime Minister would appoint Likud MKs as ministers as soon as the bill passes its third reading, which is not expected to happen until tomorrow night at the earliest. But the opposition is set to put up a fierce fight against the bill and submit numerous objections to the amendment beginning this afternoon. The opposition parties began their attacks against the bill in yesterday's plenum. Said Zionist Union leader Isaac Herzog, "We are in the midst of a very significant public and political battle. For 2 months, Netanyahu has not been able to form a government and bring it to the Knesset for approval. I'm saying, as I've said for a while, that we need to look into the feasibility of an alternative government. The Zionist Union leader said the Israeli public was stunned by the cost of the coalition deals Likud reached with its partners, which he stated totaled 20 million shekels per coalition MK. The anti-Netanyahu chorus was joined by Yesh Atid leader Yair Lapid, who said Netanyahu is showing contempt for the Knesset, the law, and the democratic process. The money will go to unnecessary jobs in government offices. This is what he was elected for, to take money and waste it? In response to all these attacks, the Likud party issued a statement saying the opposition to raising the number of ministers from 18 to 20 is hypocritical. First and foremost, the incoming government will be smaller than the outgoing one, which had 22 ministers. And secondly, enlarging the government saves money by bolstering government stability. The several million shekels it costs to add 2 ministers is negligible compared to the billions spent when the country goes to elections every 2 years. Aaron?
Thanks for that report. President Reuven Rivlin will today conclude his 3-day visit to Germany by meeting Chancellor Angela Merkel. The visit commemorates 50 years of diplomatic ties between Israel and Germany. The president also paid tribute to European Jews murdered during the Second World War at the Gleis 17 Memorial in Berlin. We'll get more in this report from IBA's Alexander Jen.
70 years after the Holocaust and 50 years after the start of diplomatic ties between Israel and Germany, the presidents of the two countries are looking forward without forgetting the past. President Rivlin and German President Joachim Gauck spoke at the same gathering of sharing the values of democracy and freedom of expression while standing firm against modern-day anti-Semitism.
Democracy alone does not make us immune to nationalism and fascism. No nation is immune to anti-Semitism.
Following a dinner in Berlin with Gauck at the Bellevue Palace, the two marveled at the book of special stamps created to commemorate 50 years of diplomatic ties between Berlin and Jerusalem. Gauck spoke highly of the bond that has evolved between Germany and Israel, saying, "We know the past and the crimes against humanity of the Holocaust forged an indissoluble bond between us. But we also know that it is not only the past that binds us, but also the values we believe in." He went on to say, "It makes me happy that over the past few years there have been not only more visitors, but also more people staying longer, living here in Berlin, who come from Israel." To kick off Rivlin's second day, he visited Gleis 17, or Track 17, at Berlin's Grunewald station. It was from this track that over 50,000 Jews were transported to Nazi concentration camps between 1941 and 1945. Rivlin paid tribute by laying a wreath on the tracks and lit a candle in remembrance. Following a service remembering the victims, Rivlin stressed the recent rise in anti-Semitism.
70 years have passed since the last transport left Platform 17. Yet, once again, fascist and neo-Nazi movements are growing stronger and stronger on European soil. Apathy, indifferences, or denial are not the answer.
Rivlin was joined at the tracks by Holocaust survivor Margot Friedlander, who hid in Berlin during the war for a year and 3 months. German Chancellor Angela Merkel, who Rivlin is to meet today, said, "I'm very pleased that the Israeli president is visiting Germany to celebrate 50 years of diplomatic relations between Germany and Israel. I'm looking forward to meeting him for the first time. In Germany, we believe that the two-state solution is the best way to achieve lasting peace in the region. I will make the case for this in my meeting with the president." On his final day, Rivlin also met with Foreign Minister Frank-Walter Steinmeier in Rivlin's Berlin hotel before concluding the 3-day visit. The two discussed Iran's nuclear threat and its supply of arms to Hezbollah in Syria, as well as a push for the renewal of trust between Israelis and Palestinians. 50 years after the establishment of bilateral ties between Jerusalem and Berlin, relations have never been stronger. Alexandra Jen for IBA News.
Staying with bilateral ties between Jerusalem and Berlin, and German Defense Minister Ursula von der Leyen is on the last of her 2-day visit to the country. She was welcomed by an honor guard at the Defense Ministry in Tel Aviv, where she held extensive talks with Defense Minister Moshe Ya'alon about regional security issues. During a joint press conference, the two defense chiefs emphasized the strong relationship between the two nations. Von der Leyen also addressed the possible nuclear agreement between Iran and the Western powers, saying that in her view the deal would improve Israeli security, but that the Iranians must provide sufficient transparency to ensure that the deal is being implemented. She added that the alternative is no agreement and reliance on sanctions, which doesn't guarantee an end to the threats against Israel. The announcement that Saudi Arabia's monarch will not be attending U.S. President Barack Obama's Camp David summit on the Middle East is creating waves and widely being interpreted as a diplomatic snub. King Salman met with Obama at the Erga Palace in Riyadh this past January, soon after assuming the throne. But his refusal to attend the two-day conference slated to open tomorrow follows years of complaints that Washington doesn't take Riyadh's concerns seriously enough and has instead been distracted by attempts to resolve the Iranian nuclear dispute. Instead, the king will reportedly attend a meeting of the Gulf Cooperation Council, where several member states have long expressed fear that the U.S. president's attempts to forge a deal with Iran will fail to confront Tehran's support of the Shiite Muslim militias operating in Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, and Yemen that they blame as the greatest cause of regional instability, sectarian tensions, and even for bolstering Sunni jihadists. White House officials insist that there has been no diplomatic slight by the king's no-show and that his replacements, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Nayef and Defense Minister, Deputy Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, are more than sufficient.
There's been no concern raised by our Saudi partners, either before the change in travel plans or after, related to the agenda at Camp David. So I know that there have been some speculation that this change in travel plans was an attempt to send a message to the United States. If so, that message was not received because all the feedback that we've received from the Saudis has been positive. And we continue to be confident that the senior officials who will be representing the interests of Saudi Arabia at the meeting will be able to, are empowered to not just represent the views of Saudi Arabia in the meeting, but also to implement any decisions that are made in the context of the meeting. So the point is, the President wanted to convene a discussion with our GCC partners with the goal of modernizing and deepening our security cooperation with them. I'll point out that these GCC members consider the security cooperation that they have with the United States as integral to their own country's national security. So it is in the interest of these countries to send senior members of their national security team who can represent the views of their country and ensure that they live up to any commitments that they make in the context of the meeting.
Israel and Hamas share common interests, and Jerusalem needs the Islamic terrorists to remain in control of Gaza to prevent the enclave from descending into chaos. That's the view of head of the Southern Command, Major General Sami Turgeman, who told the Idiot Ahronot newspaper today that Hamas rejects global jihadi groups such as al-Qaeda and the Islamic State, leading to shared interests with Israel in maintaining quiet, calm growth and prosperity. According to Turgeman, the only alternative to Hamas is chaos, and the security situation would become far worse in its absence. Despite his predictions that Hamas will continue to expand its armed capabilities and will renew fighting with Israel every couple of years, Turgeman argued against proposals that Israel retake the territory or attempt to oust Hamas from power. The best solution at the present time, according to the top IDF leader, is to try to secure as many periods of quiet as is possible. Carnage on the nation's roads continues. 2 people were killed and 8 others were injured in another deadly accident this morning along Highway 40 near Moshav Hatsav in the southern Lachish region when a semi-trailer collided head-on with a tractor carrying foreign workers from Thailand. Paramedics pronounced the 2 victims dead on the scene and evacuated the injured to a nearby hospital, including 1 in critical condition. Since last Thursday, 14 drivers, passengers, and pedestrians have lost their lives in traffic-related incidents, including 5 people yesterday alone. According to the National Road Safety Organization, the death toll on the nation's roads has continued to climb for the 3rd consecutive year. Since the start of 2015, 124 people have died, representing a nearly 25% increase over the number of victims during the same time frame last year. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry arrived in Sochi today for talks with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Ahead of the meeting, Moscow set a hostile tone for the visit, which deals with sticky issues of Russia's involvement in Ukraine and the Iranian nuclear talks. According to the State Department, Kerry's first visit to Russia since the outbreak of war in eastern Ukraine has the minimum expectation of maintaining direct lines of communication with senior Russian officials and to ensure that the U.S. views are clearly being conveyed. During their talks, Kerry is expected to encourage Putin to push pro-Russia separatists in Ukraine to observe the increasingly fragile ceasefire. He will also test Putin's support for Syrian President Bashar al-Assad by soliciting Russian backing for a political transition in Damascus to resolve the civil war. Kerry is also likely to address the U.S. disapproval of the Kremlin's decision to lift its 5-year ban on selling the advanced S-300 air defense system to Iran. Rabbi Yoshiyahu Pinto will spend 1 year behind bars. That's the verdict handed down by the Tel Aviv